Well, hello and welcome to the session, The Roadmap to Planning Your Partnership Venture for Success. Now, please can you just, somebody just type into the chat box to make sure that you can hear me. We tried this session this morning and we had some technical difficulties, but hopefully they've been sorted by now. But I just want to double check, and yes, you can hear. That's fantastic. So welcome, and thank you for coming along. And this is let's get started. So let's have a look at the roadmap to planning your partnership venture for success. And we're going to look at 5 overlooked steps that can make the difference between success and failure next time that you put off, even if it's the first time that you put a partnership venture together. And I would suggest to you that if you have any questions, can you put them into the chat space, and then I can either answer them as we go along, or I can leave them to the end. But if you have any questions, I would dearly, dearly love to hear them. So let's get started. Now, you listen and if you talk to people who've been in some kind of a partnership venture, and I'm using the word partnership venture because usually when you think about partnerships, and people think about, full-blown business partnerships, but partnership ventures can be anything where people come together, businesses come together, community organizations come together for a level of collaboration. And I'll explain that in a couple of slides. But what happens is that you're coming together and you're obviously to achieve an outcome, and you find that actually when you talk to people, what seemed like a good idea at the time can turn into an absolute nightmare. And this is what we want to talk about, because this is what a couple of years ago I actually went out and did some research, and I'll explain further. But let's start with the actual statistics first. And if you talk to people, you usually hear 80%, 90% of joint ventures or partnerships actually fail within 3 years. Now, you can say that, but I wanted to be a little bit realistic. So I actually checked out the ABS data, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and they put the figure at around about 50%, but that's the formal partnership. So partnership ventures actually could be quite higher than 50%, but I can't actually state what the figure is. I don't know if anybody's actually come up with the actual figure, but in the absence of that, we're saying 1 in 2 partnerships at least, or partnership ventures, fail within 3 years. So this is why. This is not why, but this is some of the things that we found as to what is influencing this failure rate. So let's start with this. Why are you here? I mean, this is you. This is for you. If you're considering a partnership venture, whether it's a business partnership or whether it's a community partnership, we've actually put together a whole package that can be used for both business and in the community context. It's for you if you value your business or your organization and your friendships, because a lot of partnership ventures are put together based on relationships, and that's probably where the problems start. If you want to be sure that a partnership venture is the right choice, you can rush into a partnership venture, but perhaps it may be that that's not what you need. Or you're in a partnership venture and you want to make sure that you're all on the same page. And that's an interesting one. Or you've been in a partnership venture, you've got burned and you're about to do it again, and you want to do it differently this time. You know that saying where people say if you do something, you do the same thing again and again and again and again, and you get the same results. Well, in my talking to business owners and community managers, that there were those serial partnership people who did get burned, actually went out and did it again, and then did it a third time. So it's like, well, how did you learn here? So we found some interesting things along the way. Now, before I introduce myself, and I'm sorry I have just gone straight into this without actually introducing myself, I just want to say that this is not legal advice. This is business advice. And if you're looking, you will come up with some ideas that I would say to you, if they touch a nerve, then definitely contact your legal teams to be able to get the right process in place for you. So, as I said, this is the rider here. We're not here to provide legal advice, but we're here to perhaps give you some thoughts about, well, if you are going to take some kind of formal partnership, put a formal partnership in place, these are some of the things that you might think of, which you probably wouldn't think of otherwise. Okay, so yes, who am I? Who is the person behind this voice? Well, my name is Pat Gross of the Community Entrepreneur. And I've been sort of involved in partnerships and I've been fascinated by partnership ventures for some time. So this is why I put this together. I started off because, a good few years ago now, I was working in a university that had an international, transnational project in place, and it was the brainchild of my manager. And somewhere along the way, the partners went in a completely different. This is as I mentioned, community. This was a university. It was actually about teaching practices across Europe. And I found that, and my manager found that her idea had been hijacked by other members of the partnership and was going in a completely different direction. So at that very point, it fascinated me to say, well, what was it that wasn't quite right when they put their partnership together? Now, just before I came to Australia a few years ago now, I found myself working in a partnership of 10 universities. And they created a business. And it was quite interesting because it was put together, and then it was about learning on the job and getting things in place. And we found that we had quite a few teething problems. Now, interestingly enough, I think that's the one partnership venture, and it actually became a partnership company, that actually did last the test of time. So we're not talking about 3 years here. This partnership is still going 20 years later. So, but I have to say to you, right at the beginning, it did have its teething problems, but they managed to sort them out. So everything is rescuable as long as you've got a plan in place. And then when I came to Australia, I worked in a government body that we overlooked projects that were funded for community partnerships. And it was interesting that, and even since then, in my own business, where I've been working with putting community organizations together into partnership situations, that we found that you could tell which ones were destined to fail most of the time. And I'm saying most of the time because just recently, one did fail, which was set up properly, but what happened was just one change. And that change was a change of senior level manager. And at that point in that partnership, everything fell apart, even though they had all the planning in place, all the commitment in place. But we'll explain not so much why them in particular, but what can happen if there's just one thing that's out of place in your arrangement. And look, that was talking about communities, but I was so fascinated working in the business environment that I actually went to speak to business owners, and they were quite open. And when they opened up, I heard some horror stories, some real doozies. And when it comes to businesses in particular, business owners tend to go on trust. They tend to go on pre-existing relationships, and if they don't follow these 5 steps that I'm going to tell you about, they just put this relationship together, put this idea together, put this partnership together, and then they go. And then something goes wrong, and you can guarantee, areas of where it's likely to go wrong. But at the time, it's like having a honeymoon. And then when it blows apart, you find that there's a lot of acrimony. There's a lot of betrayal or feelings of betrayal. And you find that, the whole thing is quite serious. It's not just financial. You've lost your friends. It impacts on friends and family, etc. So in the business environment, more so even than in the community environment, it's important, very important, that you do the groundwork before you actually agree to partner together. Because, as I say, you go on blind trust, and then even with the partners with the best of intentions in the world, something will go wrong. And as we go through this session today, I'll give you some examples of some of the things that tend to go wrong, the most common failures, shall we put it. So, before we actually get started, and we talk about partnerships, and I've been very careful to call them partnership ventures, because if you just say partnerships, you automatically think of formal legal business partnerships. But actually, Department of Human Services back in 2002, 2003, adopted this framework that was put together, which is the levels of partnerships. And just to give ideas, I mean, first of all, you can go out and you can do your networking. And at that point, yes, it's not a partnership as such, but it's the benchmark, because that's where, when it comes to networking, that's when you start developing a basic level of trust. You get to know people out there, you refer to them, and it's great. Today, even more so, because face-to-face networking is supported by online. And from the networks that we belong to, we get referrals online simply because of our offline networking. So you do build a relationship at a basic level when it comes to just going out there and networking. And that's a basic level of trust. And as trust deepens, there's a level of cooperation. And that means that if you know somebody's doing something, you might just decide not to do it, just so, you're creating that harmony. So cooperation is that, the first level up, which is more to do with just making changes or making arrangements so that you're including some, aware of and being nice to somebody else and letting them do something. Coordination then takes that to another level of trust, where you start, maybe that you decide, I'm thinking in the training environment as an example, where you might, or a business, where you might be offering programs, and you decide that okay, this other organization wants to offer programs, so they might offer them at a different time. You might then decide to promote each other's activities. So that's the next level up in terms of a partnership, because you are actually beginning to meld together, to consider each other's businesses or operations. And then the collaboration, and that, I mean, if in the business environment, a lot of that is the joint ventures which are happening today, where you have two different businesses that come together, and then they create this whole new product program, online venture, etc. In the community sector, definitely collaboration when it comes to being able to provide the services within a community, and you might come to the point of having a formal memorandum of understanding. And then there's what I call the full-blown integration, which is when you do actually become a formal legal partnership, and in the community sector, you might actually have a merger or a takeover. So I had to explain that partnerships are built on trust. There's different levels, but at each level, I would still say, as you go up or down that list, you start to there's more risk involved, and therefore it's more important that you do a little bit more homework. So, partnerships is a learning process, and this is some of the what we've learned from talking to business owners and to managers in community organizations who have really got their fingers burnt, because you don't realize there's personalities involved. If you're your own manager or your own business, you tend to be in control. But when you're working with somebody else, you may be somebody who wants to give a little bit just to, make sure that in the interests of cooperation and collaboration. But you'll also find that there are some people who don't make decisions, who are what we say lazy, who are really are in this for somebody else to do all the work. And then you get the control freaks, and we'll talk about them later. And they're the ones who tend to come forward, and they're the ones where there's resentment down the line. Especially if the partner or partners have given them some latitude at the beginning because they've had the drive, they've had the leadership. But then if you actually own your own business or your own organization, and then you're in this relationship, resentment can easily come into this. Agendas. That's an interesting one, because that's come out quite a bit, is that there could be some hidden reasons why you have people who want to partner with you. I think of some real doozies when there's been some financial issues, and examples of people business partnering to hide their own financial issues, and to I wouldn't say to offload their problems. That's probably some of the worst examples I've heard, and I've heard a few of those where there's been some ventures put in place where it's been really to offload some of their problems by passing them on to others. Family, that's another biggie, especially when it comes to small businesses, or even in community organizations when there is actually family members actually in the organization as well. But it's more so in businesses where families do have an influence, especially if you're, for instance, tradies, and you come together in a partnership, and you've got a wife in the background, and she's part of that decision making, but she, as far as influencing him is concerned. But in a partnership, the family is secondary and must remain secondary. And if I can just alert you, if you go to our website, partnershipstoolbox.com, there's an interview with two tradies, and they give you their recommendations, and they actually are still friends. Their partnership lasted 8 years. They were very good in coming forward with their, the issues are concerned, and one of the strong top recommendations were keep family out of any ventures. So it's a learning process, and it's not the first time and it's not the last time that I heard of what happens when family get involved. Inexperience of managing businesses, and a lot of that, again, I'm going to use, for example, tradies who come together. They're technicians, they're skilled in their area, but they're coming together and they don't, again, I'm using this example that we've got on our website, is that they don't realize that they actually needed a business manager, because they were great at doing what they did, but coming together and being a more formal arrangement, they really needed a business, marketing, financial type focus in their organization, which they didn't really need or didn't think they needed when they were just individual organizations. And then I mentioned the word financial chess, and that's just to mention there that the examples I've heard of in business in particular, where somebody's been burnt for $500,000, $1.5 million by business partners who knew what they were doing, and the naivety of these and trust of those who got burnt. So, but this is the worst side of being in a partnership, and I know that's why I call it a learning process. So what we did was we put together the Partnerships Toolbox, which, as I say, you can go on at any point and have a look on our website about it, and there's some examples. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, in the Partnerships Toolbox, what we did was we looked at how to do a step-by-step process so that you are doing is effectively a business plan for a partnership venture. If you're a business, you go into business and you have a business plan. If you're a community organization, you have a strategic plan and business plan. But when you go into a partnership, you tend to just go straight into the partnership and do the planning afterwards. What I'm giving you now are 5 things to do before that actually might stop you from hitting the problems that I've mentioned earlier and others. So let's get started. I'm going to show you the 5, and I call them overlooked steps because of the businesses I've spoken to and of the community organizations I've spoken to, very, very few, if any, had actually done any prior planning. I have used this strategy with community partnerships, and I use them with my own clients. When I bring clients together who are working together, the first thing I do is put together the business case. And so this is going to be a taster. And if you've got pen and paper and this is of interest to you, then please, by all means, let's put this information down in writing. So let's start. First of all, and I know it's a bit pedantic, but believe me, being pedantic could save you, as I mentioned, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could save you heartache, and it could save you your friendships, and in some cases it could save you your marriage. Well, first of all, it's a great idea going out to do something together, but the first thing you need to do is to be very clear what the gap in the marketplace is and what is the opportunity. And then you look at this opportunity, can we cover this opportunity? Or is there a gap that we can't, but somebody else could come together to us, and between us, we could fill this gap. Now, in the not-for-profit space, particularly with government funding, that's how government likes community organisations and with businesses to collaborate. They like to see that if there's a big community issue, that it's not just one organisation, it's a group of organisations coming together with different skills and different expertise to form a partnership that will fill this gap. So, and it's the same in the business environment in a way, and that's where joint ventures come in. They see a new opportunity, there's a gap, nobody's done it, they haven't got the expertise themselves, they're limited, so they'll look out and there's somebody else who's coming along with the skills they need, come together, and hey presto, you've got a partnership. Now, that's great, but what you really need to do first is it a partnership that we need? The idea of community and different organisations coming together, it does have a lot of good sort of things about it. When it comes to give you an idea, when it comes to businesses, be mindful that business owners, by definition, are their own bosses. So if you want to go into partnership with somebody else, you've got to look at, do I really want to give over some of my power to somebody else? And look, if you're like me, at the end of the day, that's why I went into business. And if I was going to a full-blown partnership venture, I don't think I could actually give over the power. I would compromise for so long, and then I would have to have that control. So that's something you probably would need to be aware of, is how much power of the way you operate that you want to give over to somebody else. And then the next thing you think of, well, actually, if I was to go into a partnership venture, what is the proposition, the value proposition that we could bring to a partnership? So what are the strengths? What is it that we can do that we can attract somebody else who will complement us, so that you know exactly what your strengths are? Just by going through the exercise, the gaps, the opportunity, you're actually doing your homework in terms of identifying if there is a need for something out there. How could you fill it? Is a partnership the right idea, or is there another way? And it could be that, as if you're a business, for example, rather than a partnership, you might be looking for and again, a silent investor, or a loan, or just getting new staff with different skills to take you in a new direction. So I'm saying is, before you blindly go into a partnership venture, just check out in the first instance that is the right direction to achieve the new opportunity. So what if you were to skip this proposition? I call it the proposition stage. Well, it's, again, you see, because you could bring somebody along, or you've got a friend out there, and as I said, some of these are built on existing relationships, and you think that they're the right partners, but actually, if you actually do that prior stage, what you're looking for and the gaps that you're looking for might not be the fit of this potential partner that you thought was there for you. So that's what I mean there. If you do that and look at the need and look at the gaps from your organization's perspective, you've got a better idea of who the right partner should be. Or, as I said, you might find yourself in a partnership when actually what you really needed was investment, a loan, or to redirect your organization and look at different skill sets in your staff. In other words, you wanted to remain your own boss and achieve that another way. So, as I said, that is important, that you actually are very clear that you need a partnership and why you need a partnership. Simple, but as I said, not many people are doing it. Okay, so if you actually look at step 2, and this is going on from what I've just been saying, is find the right partners, and I call it matchmaker heaven or hell. And that picture was actually taken off our website. And again, this is feedback from conversations I've had. And you said, I didn't think it would happen to me. We got on great. But when it did, whoa. So all we can say is that on the website, there is a free guide. And that guide actually is about looking at the foundations. And what I mean when we talk about foundations is if you find somebody, you know, they might fit that original criteria that we just talked about in the proposition. You really need somebody who's on the same page as you in many ways. And I'm not just talking about the business ways, but actually those tacit ways. Somebody who shares the same values that you do, who's as committed as you are. I don't want somebody who says they're committed. Check out that they're passionate. They've got the same vision. That they've got the same philosophy. Check their organizational culture or the way they work. If it's just one person, you know, with another person. But if it's an organization to organization, yes, the cultures may be different. But you know, can you actually make adjustments for those different cultures? I've been working with cultures with neighborhood houses and TAFE institutes. And you know, it's been difficult to navigate the different cultures, but there's been commitment from the top and an understanding that the cultures need, you know, the whole challenge is to work through the different cultures, but they were aware of that in the first place. And also that level of trust, that trust must be high. As I mentioned, depending on the level of partnership that you're going for, the higher and the more that's at stake, the higher the trust from everybody concerned and integrity. So again, you know, if you have it, I invite you to go onto the website, download that foundations. It's actually a self-assessment, so it's got questions that you can then give a copy to your potential partner or partner organization, get them to run through it, and then just map the responses and see what you come up with. It's an interesting exercise, but if you're not working with somebody who's on the same page philosophically, then you're going to again experience a few major issues down the line. These things don't happen straight away. They come up over time. This is the interest in build the business case. And what I do with my clients is I've got this framework. It's a template. It's called the business case. And they go through the questions and I give it to each or independently. And then I bring them back together again and we'll look at them together and then come up with a business case, which is based on, you know, bringing them both together as one or three or four organizations together as one business case. And it's interesting because they go away and they have to think about, you know, there's a few things they need to think about, but these are just a few, some of the key points. Is what's the benefit of a partnership? Again, it's going back to thinking about, is a partnership the best way forward? Get them to think about the vision. Again, are they on the same page? Are they looking for that same ultimate solution, the vision? And the outcomes, you know, the consequences of what they're doing. Also to think about what's in scope and what's out scope. And that's interesting because I've been working in the community sector, for example. I've seen it where one organization says, we'll throw everything in. You know, we're open. because that's the way they think. And then you've got others that go, oh, no, 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 we can't have that because we've got this and we've got this section and we've got whatever. So it's interesting. But at the end of the day, if you don't sit down and work out what part of your business operation or your community operation is included in this venture and what bits are not included in this venture, make it very clear before you commit. And in fact, if you do that and you work out and be very clear about what's in and what's not in scope, if you're actually going into a formal agreement, you can go to the lawyers with a better idea. And maybe you start asking some financial questions because there'll be parts of your business that are announced, what you're protecting. We'll talk about it later, but you might have some intellectual property, et cetera, et cetera. So figure out in this business case what's in and what's in. And then the implications for your resources. And what do I mean by that? Well, again, this will come into your legal teams. Some of it will. Is the level of control, the level of decision making. Who makes those decisions? And I know I've just saw a note today about, paying dividends if you're a business partnership, all that kind of thing. You need to be looking at the level of control that you're willing to give over who does what in any collaboration. Otherwise, you do end up with that sort of the fight going on at some point. Because you'll find that the control freak will take over unless there's something that you can back up in writing in the initial agreement about who does what and when. So that's why it's important to think about that level of control in your decision-making process. The staffing, if it's a partnership venture that's not just a business to business, but it might be include large, it could be larger businesses that employ staff, or it could be community organizations who are involved in this. It could be that in this venture, you might be creating a shared services arrangement, for example, where you're actually rationalizing your staff, and you might think that somebody here isn't, they may end up being made redundant, out of a job, retrenched, whatever. So you need to think about that, the implications of this venture on your staffing, your intellectual property. Bring that to the table, and how it's being used if you use it in a partnership venture, and what happens, if something were to go wrong. So you think about that. This is a biggie. People don't think about this, but they come to the table, and they bring their contacts with them. They bring their customers with them. And I've just been watching Suits. I've been the Canadian TV series about lawyers, and there was just they actually had a company that demerged, and they went after each other's clients, after each other's customers. So it's nothing new, but I've seen I saw some really good partnerships that lasted just short of 3 years. I haven't seen many that have lasted more than 3 years, actually. So that a 50% figure could be quite higher than that. But when they've broken up, they've had this, well, whose clients are whose? And what happens when you create new clients in the new venture and then that venture breaks up? So there's things you need to think about there. And the one thing you want to do is protect your own clients. And last thing you want is somebody poaching your clients when things go wrong. Or your infrastructure. Need to think about that as well, your buildings, etc. Your financials, and look at the cost of going into a partnership, but also look at the cost benefits of going into a partnership. And that's interesting, over time, because there will be some kind of a financial cost. in putting it all together, but have a look at, do the financial projections and what I call the opportunity costs. And that's thinking about, well, the opportunity costs if we don't go into a venture together. An obvious way of looking at that, I'm going back to the community space again. I'm thinking about those, a government contract, and they're looking for, partnerships of organisations. Well, the opportunity costs if they don't do that is they don't get the big project. So that's just a simple one. But have a look at that. What are the opportunity costs if we don't go into? There's opportunity costs if they do from go into this, but there's also opportunity costs if they don't. So, again, I've got this template which goes through all of these sort of things, so you can look at and figure out independently and then bring them to the table. And it'd be interesting to see, what IP your potential partner has and IP that you have, and what their thinking is about their customers and networks and what your thinking is. And that's when you come together and have a compromise or agreement that you can then take to the legal teams, and they can actually, it gives you some kind of, you've actually thought about it before you go see the lawyer. Or you could find that you actually put these agreements together and all of this has been missed, and then something goes wrong, and then you've just got this bigger problem later on. Okay, so as I said, one of the things to watch out for, some of the things is partners with their own agendas, and I like to see that agendas put on the table. It's sometimes it's good, it may be confronting, but again, we try and get people our businesses or organisations to put their agendas. I said, watch out for fraud, and that's when we found, especially with the business, in the business arena, where those who really got their fingers burnt as because of some fraudulent behaviour that's been going on. Again, it's hidden agendas. Watch out for the control freaks. And they could be, say, your best friend who becomes a partner with you, but at the end of the day, if you're in business and you're in charge of your business, when you go into a partnership, again, it could be that you may have two control freaks, you and somebody else. And what does that mean for this venture? And then, as I mentioned earlier, the influence of family, especially, as I said, I mentioned traders as an example. When you've got small businesses that have got family behind them, and that can be quite. It does step into the workplace, does step into decision making, and sometimes the other partner feels as though they're being outnumbered, and it can be quite confronting. So, as I say, we get together, we'll look at the business case, you start thinking about, well, what's this going to do for us? And you think, okay, we're still going to go ahead with this. We seem to as if we fit here. The next step is to put together an action plan. So we've gone from that. Is this, is there an opportunity here? Do we have the right kind of partner to, okay, so let's sit down and look at our own business case. Oh yeah, we seem to be fitting well now. So let's have a look at how we're going to work together. And again, and this is the stuff that you can use to impress the legal teams, shall we say, that you've actually got that far and you've thought about it. So, again, what do we want to achieve? What objectives? What's our goals? Again, any business plan you want to have to achieve a certain point, achieved certain, financial gains. If it's a community, you've got some social goals that you want to achieve, and so you want to make that change. So you really want to sort of all be on the same page with the objectives. When I talked about the partnership where my manager was in the transnational partnership and something went wrong, we identified it quite simply as we had a conflict of objectives, because her objectives turned out to be different to the objectives to the rest of the, well, to one or two of the partners who had more of an influence. So if your objectives, what we learned there is to make sure that everybody has the same common objectives. Each partner may have some objectives that may be a little bit different because they're, in terms of their agenda, but they will have some objectives that are common. And what we do there is we actually get some, post-it notes and get potential partners to actually put those objectives down on post-it notes, put them on a table, one objective per post-it note, and then we go around the table and people take off the table the objectives they don't agree with. And what's left are the objectives that everybody agrees with. Therefore, they are the common objectives. It's as simple as that, but it's also confronting. So we achieve the objectives, and you have to have the same common objectives. We look at the key roles of the partners, and what their roles and responsibilities are. Who else will be involved? I gave you the example of Craig and Jason, who are good tradies and good complementary skills, but they actually went 8 months before they realized that they needed a business manager and a good finance person. So, again, if they'd have thought about it at the action plan stage, then they may have had a third partner, or they would have found or employed or found the money to employ this business manager right from the word go. And it sort of did cost them some business, it did cost them a bit further down the line, but it took them 8 months to find out that mistake. The who, what, where, why, when, and how. And I'd sit down and I'd go through all those statements. Who's going to do what? Why are we doing this? When? Where? Again, where you're going to be working. When? How are you going to work? I'm just giving you those now so you can actually, in your action plan, start thinking about what you're going to do under those simple criteria. Again, I mentioned in your action plan, your decision-making process, your communication process as well. Now, that's one thing, again, is decision-making we've mentioned and who's responsible for what, and your legal team will sort that one out with you. But another problem, which is just as bad, is the communication between partners. Whether it's communication between business partners, and I've seen it where somebody has not actually done what they said they were going to do, and they've not told the other business partner or partners, and that other business partners got very frustrated. They've not been able to address the problem. I've seen it where a community partner has run off and made lots of decisions and done stuff and not actually talked and consulted and discussed with their other community partners. So that led to resentment and breakdown of those partnerships. And it's the same in the business arena. There's a breakdown when there's no communication. So again, in your action plan is how are you going to communicate with each other, and think about internal as well as externally. And then the investment, how much money is going into that business. And this is where you've got to get an accountant. And if you've got 2 accountants here, just do 2 different. If you've got accountants, go for a third accountant is what I'm trying to say. Because again, one of the horror stories I heard, where this poor guy managed to lose, I think it's either $500,000 or $1.5 million. It was quite a lot anyway, because he was he actually had a partner, so there was two of them. Another two came along, so it became four partners, and the two other partners managed to divest their debt onto them, however they did it, and their accountant was involved in this, the other guy's partner's accountant. And so the story there is, if you've got if you've got a partner, look for somebody independent, to make sure that you, sorry, somebody just sent me a message, just to make sure that you can trust the other partner's accountant, but can you trust that they're working in your interests as well? You would think so, but it's not always the case. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So again, be very clear about what you're investing in the partnership. And again, make sure that, it's covered, and thinking about the financials and what happens if you start to make a loss, etc., etc. So think about these in your action plan before you get to that stage. And I know it's very pedantic and it sounds, let's just get started here. What's all this about? But believe me, you can rush into something and then you pay the price later on. And this is what I was hearing again and again and again, and it wasn't very nice. And as I said, once you've got those in place, then you can start to get legal. You can go straight to your lawyers anyway, but it's more like, well, actually, let's be pedantic. Let's do the planning. Make sure we've got the right partners. Make sure that we've got a good business case. Make sure that we've got, we know what we're going to be doing. And then let's go see the legal teams. And then that could be, I put in a memorandum of understanding there, because that's usually what happens in community partnerships. Because it's, at the end of the day, if I'm right, MOUs are really not that enforceable, but they are a really good way of being able to, if you honour them, it's a really good way of determining who does what, and you've got something in place. But the legal teams, the formal contracts, and as I said, also see an accountant. So when it comes to the legal stuff, as I said, this is not legal advice. This is more like doing your business planning before you get to that point. Okay, let's have a look now. All right, so what we've done there is those 5 steps, and I say we do have them as they are basis of our planning for partnerships. We do use them with clients, and they do actually lead to. And so ones we've been using recently have been in the community space, and they've actually informed a memorandum of understanding. This would inform, in the business space, probably some kind of a legal agreement. But as I said, when it comes to legal agreements, those things about what happens with your customers if if it breaks down, your intellectual property, or the IP that you establish in a partnership arrangement, all those things, they really do need to be thought about, and finances. So those 5 steps, it says do your background work. This is to stop you drowning. This is drowning in quicksand. Do your background work first. Find the right business partners. It's not necessarily your best friend or somebody who you're connecting with and you get on great with. To be honest with you, those are the ones that are really, really tragic when they go wrong. Build your business case, put in your action plan, and get your legals and financials sorted. How many of the partnership ventures or people that we've talked to actually did that process? Apart from doing the legal and financials, very, very few. And I think that may be because there isn't actually a system well, we've got a system, but there aren't that many of those systems out there, and people just really do not know where to start. So that's where we come in, because this is what we've got in place. We've got this whole system. So if you know somebody out there who is looking to put together a partnership, it could be a community, it could be a joint venture, it could be a business partnership. And like we say to them, just let them know, take them to the partnershipstoolbox.com, because we have got something that we can help them. And, investment in our time here could be a lot easier than the heartache down the line. And that's where the tragedy is. So, as promised, I hope I've delivered to you the 5-part strategy, the 5 things you need to do, yes? So, as I said, why are there so many partnership ventures that just don't cover the bases? I think it's because they don't think they need to go through this, or they don't know about it, or they're just too busy enjoying the honeymoon, or they just don't know where to start. Now, does that actually sound familiar? So, this is what we can do is we've got an independent facilitation model, so you can either invest in the templates from us, or invest in our services, and we can actually do the facilitation so that you can do this without feeling unduly influenced by one or the other. So we've got self-assessment tools. We can mentor you through change, and this is just part of the process. We've also got opportunities for you to then look at if you do get to have a venture together, and you might be looking at, okay, you might be sharing some of your back of house services, and we have a look at them. Well, how does that work, your systems, etc. And we also have a change management process that you could go through if it's going to mean change for the partners. So those are more bigger ventures, and we've got them at the second half of our program. I would say to you, if you've got chance, go to our partnerships assessment toolbox at partnershipstoolbox.com and listen to and watch Jason and Craig talk about their story. We've also got some articles on there, and we've got the free guide on the foundations of what personality you need to think about. So we've got some stuff there for you. But where do you go from here? And this is our opportunity. If you know somebody, or if this is you, then if you go to the toolbox, we can actually book and talk to us. So you can have go book a time in our calendar, or even give us a call, or give me a call on 903 900 55889, and we can have a conversation, or email us. As I said, if this is a business plan for partnerships, and if this just going through this process actually saves people, if it saves them money, if it saves them heartache, if it saves their business, if it saves their family and relationships, then we've done our work. So if there's any questions now, because we've just come to, it's just about at the end of the session. If there's any questions, please put them into the chat box, and I'd be happy to give you to give you the answers. Yes, thank you for attending. My name is Pat Gross from the Community Entrepreneur, and thank you for taking time. And as I said, we'll stay online, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to open up and talk and open up the conversation. Thank you.